to take on the Blue Jays and what we've all dreamed of for, a quarter of a century of Peter Angelos' ownership, which is a relevant baseball team. While the Ravens are in training camp, Luke Jones will be sweating it out with Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh and Terrell Suggs and everyone else out in Owings Mills. Full reports at WNST.net and all of our social channels. And, of course, any breaking news, trades, trading deadline rumors, Ravens news, all comes to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. It's free. Sign up online. And, in the corner to our left, the Orioles. In the corner to the right, the Ravens. And in the middle is everything else going on, whether it's golf, whether it's auto racing, obviously college football ramping up right now. Here to talk all things Big Ten, and they had their media day earlier this week in Chicago, Illinois. And, of course, the other Harbaugh stole the show. We welcome George Schroeder back on, the national college football writer for USA Today. You can follow his amazing journey out on Twitter as he has his own miraculous story of his heart and kidney transplant that saved his lad's life. We can go out and find him at George Schroeder. That's SCHROEDER. And we always have this wonderful discussion, George, about Schroeder and Schrader and what Jay Schrader brought to your name. But it is Schroeder in your case. And welcome in college football. You're a busy guy this week, right?
I am, and by the way, I always just say, hey, just spell the name right, and I'm okay with how you pronounce it. It doesn't matter. So it's busy already. As we crank up here, all these college media days have gone on. It's the talking season, as Steve Spurrier likes to call it, but we're closing in on the actual football season, and it's amazing. My goodness, a month from now we'll be right there. So I'm ready. I've got to tell you.
College football's different than because the NFL, we're all out on the fields and there's press conferences every day, there's players every day, and there's things happening, and then there's these preseason games that quite frankly suck, and we all know that. But in college football, there's not that sort of ramp up. It's different, and I think the beauty of college football, and I've said this all week, and I'll say this all month leading up to it, is it's a box of chocolates. Like, you really don't know anything about these teams so much other than maybe what your eyes saw last year, and it's a completely different process to get ready because they literally play amongst themselves, and they are really ready for some combat come Labor Day weekend, and a lot of huge games that really sort of move the tectonic plates in game one for a lot of teams in these neutral sites, and really big sort of pre-bowl games, right?
Well, they really are, and it's one of the things that perhaps the advent of the playoff and the selection committee clearly values strength of schedule has really begun to bring about. I mean, there are schools out there that have played giant intersectional non-conference games early in the season, but not a lot of them. And now they're being joined by a bunch of people. And so that first weekend that you referenced is a really good weekend. I mean, the two best teams in terms of what the preseason ranking is going to be is probably Houston, Oklahoma, but you've got Alabama playing USC, which is an ultimate name game. You've got LSU playing Wisconsin at Lambeau Field. Listen, if I start running them down, we're gonna miss a few. But Texas, Notre Dame. You've got Ole Miss playing Florida State and Orlando. You've got Auburn at Clemson, which, by the way, you mentioned neutral site games, and all of those that we just talked about were. I like this even better. It's a home-and-home series. You have UCLA at Texas A&M. I guarantee you I'm missing 5 or 6.
Well, but, when Clemson and Auburn get together like this in week one, when in my youth, and you know this, George, Nebraska played Pacific this week, right? I mean, everybody takes on 1AA, and, Delaware's looking for a game against somebody. That's all changed now, and strength of schedule's where it's all, it's all computer-based, and once November rolls around, you either have a win or a loss, but that win certainly looks good. The loss looks awful, right?
Yeah, well, it's changed to a certain degree because week 2 is when they all play Pacific. But
right.
You're right. It has changed to a certain degree in that it used to be the ultimate goal was to have this cosmetic, really good record. If you were talking about trying to win a national title, you wanted a cosmetic record, and you could game the computers back when we were talking BCS. Before the BCS, You might have seen some of those good games, but you basically saw enough games to get you to a bowl.
Well, at that point, it was about gaming ESPN
Yeah.
to gain the media traction to get whatever 65-year-old voter or coach who doesn't see any of the other teams play. I mean, it was all based on the science of throwing darts at that point, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting, yeah, it was. And look, the selection committee is unpredictable. We've only had 2 years of them. There's a changing composition on the committee, and so it could well be that they value different things going forward. You just don't know. But what's interesting about choosing to play these, large non-conference games that have some pop early is, it gives you plenty of time to sort of rehab if you lose. It doesn't necessarily have to hurt you or knock you out of everything if you lose. Now, you probably have no margin for error going forward, but you're not done. And in the BCS era, you might have been done, which is why people were loath to play somebody really, really good in the non-conference.
Well, and it is scary anyway because you're not going to play your best football on Labor Day weekend, especially as a college team, and especially if you're a younger college team, and especially if you're playing a quarterback who, quite frankly, didn't play last year for whatever reason.
Yeah, and look, that's what you talked about at the top. That's college football. We don't know in July. We don't know in early August. And we don't know, frankly, in mid-August what these teams are going to be like because their rosters, turn over so much every year. And if you have a new guy in a marquee position at quarterback, it's really kind of a, wow, we'll have to wait till about mid-September before we can even begin to think what we have.
George Schroeder joining us here and talking all things college football. You've done a bunch of these media days, all the same or different. I've never really been to one. I see them on TV. Clearly, for the Big Ten standpoint, the Durkin story is interesting here. But, Jim Harbaugh, the other Harbaugh, as I like to call him, has become the darling for everyone to run around, follow on Twitter, speaks his mind, will recruit in your territory, even if it's DJ Durkin's territory. We had Jim here wearing Orioles gear a couple weeks ago over Patterson Park with his brother. He really has become a lightning rod for everyone in college football. And let's be honest, 2 years ago he was out fighting with the York family trying to win a Super Bowl. Now that he's involved in the college game, it's almost like bringing Tiger Woods in or something, right?
Well, he's just such a lightning rod, and he's just and he knows it, and he's just sort of brash and quirky and all these sort of, any kind of a adjective you can roll into one thing probably fits him. I mean, he's not your average college football coach, but he's obviously a very good college football coach. He's a really good showman who pretends like it's not being a showman. I mean, and he doesn't consider it to be your territory. He's going to go in, and I don't know why it is either, by the way. It's all fair game until the kids decide where they want to go to school. I kind of think he's been refreshing for the college game, and it's been fun to watch him sort of poke the big SEC bear with a stick. Frankly.
Well, and Michigan is a very, very conservative, sort of program. So for him to jump out, I mean, it's one thing to have brash at the U, right? I mean, we're used to that, and we'll talk about Mark Richt in a minute as well. But it's a little weird to have brash in the middle of the Midwest, right? Kind of, sort of.
You're exactly right about that, and it's not a little weird; it's a lot weird because of how they've been. I mean, they are. It's funny because he was talking about this rap video that he appeared in. It's one of the bazillion things he's done over the last, 18 months since he got the job that are just sort of shake your head and kind of, you kind of chuckle. But he did this rap video recently, and he was, heavily involved with it and even wrote a couple of the lyrics. And then, of course, appeared in the video singing or whatever the lyrics. But he basically said that only, all the cool people like it. Only uptight people don't like it. And then he said only uptight white people don't like it. You are basically describing what people think of Michigan.
92% of your crowd.
Right. But
on any given Saturday.
And he's being funny about that. But that's what makes – you're right. You've hit on it. That's what makes this even more sort of weird and oddly fun if you don't have any skin in the game to watch is to see a guy doing all the things he's doing the way he does them, saying things the way he says them, only he says them. and doing it at Michigan. You're exactly right.
Well, it makes it must-see media, right, for a guy like you to go out there, especially when they're not going to play any football anytime soon, right? So this is sort of the circus that gets everybody ready. And meanwhile, at Maryland, we got to go play football, George. I mean, they need a quarterback. They're going to be playing these big teams forever. They're going to have to go to Michigan State and Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and and wherever, Nebraska, and figure it out. What are the prospects for any sort of what would look like growth for Maryland this year? Would be the Weed Eater Bowl, right?
Well, I mean, you need to see incremental progress. And look, expectations everywhere are typically higher than they ought to be, I think, because we always overestimate sort of our own guys and it's sort of what we want them to be. I mean, DJ Durkin was a very good hire. I think he's going to end up building a team that is built around defense, and I think that's what we'll see. But, they're going to have to be better offensively. I mean, look, it's too bad in some ways, and look, geographically it makes all the sense in the world, but it's too bad in some ways they couldn't find a year or two in the Big Ten West and kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps there. It's a lot harder in the East, because you mentioned Michigan. We didn't talk about Ohio State. We didn't talk about Michigan State. The three big boy programs currently, and frankly perennially in the case of Michigan and Ohio State, are in the East. That said, I mean, I think if they're able to run the football the way they did last year, if they can just be a little bit better offensively, I've got confidence that DJ Durkin will end up with a good defense. I don't really know what I expect from the Terps this year, but I think long term they've got the right guy in place.
Well, they certainly have two of the tougher teams in Michigan State and Ohio State at home this year, which is a little different than doing it on the road. We are chatting with George Schroeder. He covers all things college football for USA Today. In addition to the Big Ten, and we know where the powerhouses are there, you've been to SEC, you've been to ACC. A couple of programs to watch, I think. Tennessee in the SEC, Miami in the ACC, sort of teetering and playing with, hey, we may be a team that can upset an Alabama. Hey, hold on with Clemson in Florida State. We're still down here playing football in Miami and recruiting as well. And obviously, big changes, at least out of Miami.
Yeah, well, I mean, Miami, Mark Richt coming in, that's an interesting sociological experiment, I think, given sort of his approach to life in football and sort of what we've all thought of the U and sort of their approach to life in football.
Are you calling Miami a renegade program, George? Is that what you're doing?
I'm saying there could be a cultural clash, is what I'm saying. And I think, I think he's a very, very good coach who at some point you can overstate your welcome at places, and I think that happened with him at Georgia. There's no question the program had slid a little bit, but they were still winning 10 games a year. I think he'll be really good for Miami. Just in the short term, I mean, they have Brad Kaya, who gets overshadowed in the ACC by Deshaun Watson, and rightly so, and by Dalvin Cook from Florida State, the running back who probably get the other Heisman love out of the ACC. But he's a real good quarterback, Kaya is, and I think that's a good place to start if you're trying to build or rebuild a program. If you can, dynamic quarterback play has never been more important in college football, I think, than it is right now with sort of the proliferation of offenses everywhere. You've got to have the kind of guy that can be a really good quarterback for your team to be able to keep up with the other guys. And so they're off to a good start there.
George Schroeder covering all things college football, and of course you did the SEC, which is the big banana here. Alabama every year, you can just say Alabama and throw it out there, and you sort of know they're going to be involved in this. Who else? I mean, I know Ole Miss is a team that we've talked about a little bit in the offseason as well.
Yeah, and by the way, Alabama, the possible exception to the rule I just posited, in that they appear to just sort of replace quarterbacks with guys who are not spectacular and keep winning because of the talent they have around them. But they're about to do that again for the third year in a row. We won't know who the quarterback's going to be until late August. We won't know how good he'll play or how well he'll play until sometime in mid-September, and I'm not sure the race will be over until then, really. And at some point, it's going to bite them. It almost did last year. And so while they have to be the team that you look at and you say, all right, I think they're going to win the SEC West, and I have to pick them as the SEC champion just based on the talent they have on the roster, at some point, you're going to get quarterback play that's poor enough that you're not just going to lose the one game against Ole Miss like they did last year. You're going to stumble on a second game. And I think that could easily have happened last year had they not had kind of a freakazoid running back in Derrick Henry. And I don't even mean his talent. I mean his durability, where you could hand him the ball 40 times behind a big offensive line. You can't do that with a lot of guys, and you can't control the game a lot of times and hide your quarterback, which is what they did up until the end of the year when Jake Coker was ready to play. So your original question was who else, and the easy choice is LSU, but the problem there is quarterback play over the last 7 or 8 years. It's like, how's the quarterback play going to be? Brandon Harris, they think he'll be better, but who knows? So if you want to go the other side, I would say take a long look at Tennessee and see what happens. The East is an easier ride than the West in the SEC. Tennessee has been recruiting under Butch Jones. They've got talent in place. They've got a quarterback in Joshua Dobbs who's experienced and talented. But I think we've heard the hype from Tennessee for the last year or two building, and we've yet to see it. But they were really close last year to turn the corner in several games that they almost won. And so, it's real possible that this could be Tennessee's year.
USC, any potential of giving Alabama a scare down in Dallas in the opener?
Well, I mean, USC is back scholarship-wise now from the sanctions, but, in Clay Helton, the jury's out on how he'll be as a coach. But I don't think they're back. They're not back. We're not talking about USC from 10 years ago when they were the school with all the talent. Now we're talking about Alabama as the school with all the talent. So, look, yes, they could in that opener because Alabama's, breaking a new quarterback. Sometimes Bama doesn't play real well in those openers, but they typically just grind it out and end up, you look up and it was a fairly comfortable win. That's what I think will happen, is my guess. But I do think USC has a shot to be decent as the year goes along. I just think that's a tough opener.
Always great to have you on, George. We'll continue to talk college football here as we get ready. We're not talking a lot. Now, we got a lot of Ravens, we got a lot of Orioles, but I want to slide some college football in here from time to time. It's really great of you to make some time and joining us. Always a pleasure, man.
All right, man. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
You got it. George Schroeder. You can follow him at George Schroeder out on Twitter as well as at USA Today Sports. He does cover college football. He'll be doing the American. And I know last week I had Brian Baldinger at the Big 12. A lot of the media days. And then it's going to kind of be quiet before Labor Day. But we'll be talking plenty of Ravens football. Luke's out on the field in Owings Mills. We're also covering all things Orioles all weekend long as the Birds are in Toronto. Follow along at Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.